Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me today because we have some very exciting General Hospital news to talk about, and it's definitely worth the wait. Looking ahead at General Hospital from April 20 to May 1, things in Port Charles are clearly about to get a lot more intense. New twists, unexpected moves, and sudden shocks are all on the way, and it feels like no one will be completely safe from the drama. There's a strong sense that secrets and conflicts will start bubbling up at the worst possible moments, shaking relationships and pushing characters into difficult choices. Honestly, it sounds like one of those stretches where everything changes fast and nothing stays calm for long. First, in the week of April 20 to 24 on General Hospital, Port Charles feels like it's tightening into one of those stormy stretches where every storyline starts colliding with another, and honestly, it's hard to know where to even look first. Willow Kane takes a very firm stand when it comes to Jacinda Bracken, determined to remove her from any influence over the children's lives. It's a bold move, but instead of calming things down, it seems to spark even more resistance from Michael Corinthos. From what's unfolding, Michael is not stepping back at all. In fact, he appears more driven than ever to regain control over the situation involving his former wife. You can almost feel the emotional pressure building between them, like neither side is willing to give an inch. At the same time, Ethan Lovett is moving through Port Charles in a way that feels both relaxed and strategic. He shares a light flirtatious moment with Christina Davis, which adds a bit of warmth to the tension elsewhere, but that doesn't last long. Soon after, he shifts gears completely and meets with Sonny Corinthos to discuss business matters. That contrast between charm and seriousness makes Ethan feel like someone who always has more going on beneath the surface than he shows. Elsewhere, Valentine Cassadine is back in full strategic mode, trying to convince Carly Spencer that his alliance with Nina Reeves could actually be an advantage in the ongoing conflict with Jack Brennan. But knowing Carly, this kind of pitch doesn't land easily. There's a sense that she's listening but not necessarily trusting, which makes their dynamic feel very tense and unpredictable, and then things take a much darker turn. Britt finds herself shaken by something. She uncovers something connected to Rocco Falconeri and the shooting of Ross Cullum. The emotional weight of this discovery is heavy, especially because it suggests that Jason Morgan could be pulled into the fallout. It's the kind of situation that doesn't just affect one person, it threatens to ripple through multiple lives in Port Charles. On top of that, Cassius Faison, still operating under the identity of Nathan West, seems to be reaching a breaking point. There's a strong possibility he may finally confess the truth to Britt, which would completely shift the direction of this storyline. Meanwhile, Dante Falconeri continues his investigation into Cullum, steadily working through the pieces, determined to uncover what really happened no matter where it leads. What really stands out to me in all of this is how interconnected everything feels during this stretch. No storyline is sitting still. Every character move seems to push another reaction somewhere else. It gives this week a very restless, almost pressure cooker energy, like Port Charles is holding its breath, waiting for the next explosion. Second, in this stretch of General Hospital, Port Charles really starts to feel like it's alive with overlapping stories. And honestly, I find myself following each thread like they're all pulling in different emotional directions at the same time. Ethan Lovett's return to a more personal storyline stands out right away when he reconnects with Tracy Quartermain. There's something almost nostalgic about the way their conversation unfolds. Tracy, with her sharp presence and no-nonsense attitude, doesn't miss a beat, but even she can't ignore the emotional connection to the past when Luke Spencer comes up. What really lingers here is how Ethan seems to naturally remind her of Luke. It's not forced, not dramatic in an obvious way, but more like a quiet echo of someone she once knew deeply. And that kind of reflection always hits a little differently in Port Charles, where the past never really stays buried. At the same time, Jocelyn Jacks continues pushing forward in her own investigation into Cullum. She's not backing off, not even a little, and that determination gives her storyline a sharp edge. You can feel she's chasing something bigger than just answers. There's a need for truth that keeps her moving even when things get messy or dangerous. Meanwhile, on the lighter side of things, Giovanni Gio Palmieri gives Emma Scorpio Drake a break from all the intensity. Their trip to New York brings a rare sense of ease, especially with the Broadway experience at Aladdin. It's almost refreshing, like a small pocket of joy carved out in the middle of everything else going on. And in a town like Port Charles, those moments feel almost precious because they never last long. Back home, things shift into a more grounded but still tense dynamic when Drew Kane welcomes Elizabeth Baldwin for a visit. There's a quiet weight to this interaction. Like both of them are careful with what they say, even if nothing explosive is happening on the surface. At the same time, Willow Kane seems like she might be slightly distracted during this period, especially with Elizabeth and Drew spending time together. And that's what makes it interesting sometimes. It's not what's said directly, but what someone notices in passing, the little details that might eventually connect to something much bigger. Elsewhere, Curtis Ashford and Isaiah Gannon collide in a confrontation that doesn't just pass by quietly, it builds tension quickly, the kind where neither side is willing to fully step back. But what makes Curtis's story especially layered here is what comes after. Jordan Ashford begins to open up to him in a much more vulnerable way, talking about the emotional impact of her accident and the possibility of lasting scars, both physical and emotional. It's one of those moments where Curtis isn't just in a conflict, he becomes someone Jordan can lean on. And that shift adds a deeper emotional tone to their dynamic, showing a side of both characters that isn't always on display. And then there's Felicia Scorpio, who suddenly receives unsettling news that immediately raises questions. The uncertainty around it is what makes it so intriguing. Is it tied to Anna Devane and something dangerous unfolding in her orbit, or is there another layer entirely that hasn't even been revealed yet? It's the kind of moment that quietly changes the temperature of multiple storylines at once, even before anyone fully understands why. When I look at all of this together, it really feels like this part of General Hospital is built on contrasts, old memories resurfacing through Ethan and Tracy, emotional investigations driving Jocelyn, quiet but meaningful connections forming between characters like Curtis and Jordan, and that constant undercurrent of mystery surrounding Cullum and Felicia's news. Nothing exists in isolation here. Every conversation seems to be brushing up against something bigger, and that's what keeps it so engaging to follow. Third, in the week of April 27 to May 1 on General Hospital, things around Ethan and Christina are really starting to heat up again. And I've got to say, this part feels like it's going to stir up a lot of emotional mess in Port Charles. Ethan and Christina are clearly being pulled back into each other's orbit, and there's this growing sense that their connection isn't just casual anymore. It feels layered, almost like there's history or unresolved feelings quietly building underneath every interaction they have. But what really caught my attention is that strange voicemail Ethan left at the pier. That detail alone makes everything feel a bit more mysterious, like there's something he's not fully aware of, or maybe something he's trying to avoid confronting. And then things get even more complicated when Delilah Wilson comes into the picture. There's this possibility floating around that Ethan might have had some kind of past connection with her, and the heartbreaking part is that he may not even know what has happened to her. That uncertainty adds a heavy emotional weight to his storyline, because it shifts things from simple drama into something more tragic and unresolved. On top of that, there's even speculation that Ethan could unknowingly be the father of Delilah's child. That idea alone changes everything about how people might see him moving forward, especially if the truth comes out slowly over time rather than all at once. At the same time, it's not just Delilah's situation that creates tension. Ethan's possible connection with Jacinda also raises eyebrows, especially after the way she casually mentioned her trip to Australia. It might have sounded harmless at first, but in this world, even small comments like that can hint at deeper ties or hidden history between characters. And honestly, if Ethan really has been involved with both Jacinda and Christina in different ways, that's where things start to get really uncomfortable. Christina in particular could find herself caught in an emotional storm if she realizes Ethan has been having other intense or even manipulative encounters. It wouldn't just be about jealousy, it would be about trust, confusion, and feeling like she never had the full picture to begin with. So overall, this upcoming stretch feels like it's setting Ethan up right in the middle of multiple overlapping secrets, some emotional, some potentially heartbreaking, and some that could completely change how everyone around him sees him. And knowing General Hospital, these kinds of tangled connections never stay hidden for long. Finally, in the coming stretch of General Hospital, things in Port Charles are starting to feel genuinely dangerous in a way that goes beyond personal drama. It feels like real stakes are building up for multiple characters at once. Jocelyn's situation stands out immediately because it looks like she may be stepping into serious danger without fully realizing it. There's a real possibility that Cullum could figure out her connection to the WSB, and if that happens, she might quickly become a target. The idea that he could decide to remove her from the game adds a chilling layer to her investigation, turning what started as curiosity into something far more life-threatening. At the same time, Lucas Jones also finds himself in a very vulnerable position. Cassius has already planted doubts in Jen Sidwell's mind, suggesting that Lucas might be involved in criminal activity. And once suspicion like that takes root, it tends to grow fast in Port Charles. The big question now is whether Sidwell will fully believe Lucas is responsible for Marco's death, or whether his suspicion will shift somewhere else entirely. Either way, Lucas is standing too close to a fire that could spread quickly. What makes this even more intense is how Cassius seems to be quietly manipulating pieces behind the scenes, feeding information, and nudging powerful people toward the conclusions he wants them to reach. It creates this uneasy feeling that no one is truly seeing the full picture, just fragments shaped by someone else's agenda. On another front, Ethan and Sonny may end up being drawn into the same conflict, and interestingly, they could become unlikely allies. If Sidwell continues to grow as a threat, it makes sense that both Ethan and Sonny would eventually find common ground in trying to take him down. It's one of those classic General Hospital setups where personal differences get pushed aside because the bigger danger demands cooperation. Overall, these next 2 weeks feel like they're stacking tension on top of tension. Jocelyn facing a possible WSB-related threat, Lucas getting pulled into a dangerous accusation, Sidwell tightening his grip through suspicion, and Ethan potentially stepping into a more active role alongside Sonny. Nothing feels isolated anymore. Every move seems to trigger another consequence somewhere else in Port Charles. And honestly, that's what makes this upcoming period so gripping. It's not just one storyline heating up. It's several of them colliding at the same time.